I've been there many times, man. I've seen that look in his eye. I know he's going all out, world-class, full customization in this car. It's going to be so gorgeous. He's probably going to be afraid to drive it because he doesn't want it to get dirty. But I get it, man. It's in his blood just like it's in mine. That's why he's my...
They say you can paint over anything, but not the kind of pain Ryan Evans was hiding. For years, he was the unstoppable force behind Counting Cars, the man whose hands created some of the most iconic builds on television. But then, suddenly, he started disappearing. Missed episodes, strange edits, fans noticing he looked thinner, quieter, different. And that's when people around him began whispering. Why did Ryan's closest friends say something was seriously wrong months before he vanished from the show? Why did the studio quietly remove behind-the-scenes footage featuring him? And why did Ryan avoid every interview request for almost 2 years? The truth is, Ryan wasn't just fighting stress. He was fighting something far darker. A tragedy he never wanted the world to see. A medical scare that nearly took him out of the shop forever. And a personal loss so devastating that even the network refused to mention it. But now, at 54, Ryan finally breaks his silence. And what he reveals confirms what millions of fans had already suspected, yet never imagined could be true. Stay with me, because once you hear the real reason Ryan Evans stepped away, you'll understand why he kept this hidden, and why this may be the last time he ever speaks about it again. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe. Ryan Evans was never the loud one in the shop. He didn't chase the spotlight or force himself into scenes. He simply worked, delivering paint jobs that turned ordinary metal into unforgettable artwork. That quiet focus became part of the show's identity. But when he suddenly disappeared, that same silence felt completely different. One week, Ryan was on screen, airbrushing a motorcycle tank with his usual steady hands. The next week, he was gone, without a goodbye, without a message, and without even a passing mention from the show. Fans kept waiting for an explanation that never came. The shop looked the same, the builds continued, and the engines still roared. But the man behind the paint was missing. People online noticed immediately. His Instagram slowed. He stopped appearing at car events. Even the background shots where Ryan usually worked quietly were empty. Viewers who had watched him for more than 10 years felt that something was off. It wasn't just the absence, it was the way it happened. Suddenly, silently, and without a trace, forums started filling with questions. Why did the show ignore it? Why didn't the crew mention him? Why was there no farewell episode for someone who had shaped the entire look of Counting Cars? No one had answers. Not the network, not the producers, and certainly not Ryan, who remained completely silent. That silence felt heavier than any announcement could have been. It made fans wonder if something serious had happened, something the cameras could never show. And the longer Ryan stayed gone, the clearer it became that this wasn't a simple break or a temporary absence. Something deeper was unfolding behind the scenes. But this was only the beginning. Because the reasons behind his disappearance were far more personal than anyone expected, and they were about to surface in ways no one saw coming. Long before television ever pointed a camera at him, Ryan Evans was just a kid in Los Angeles who loved drawing, skateboarding, and anything that moved on wheels. He grew up studying shapes, colors, and motion without even realizing he was training for the career that would define him. Art wasn't a hobby for him, it was a language he understood better than words. When he moved to Las Vegas, everything changed. The city was filled with custom bikes, hot rods, and builders who lived and breathed creativity. Ryan fit into that world instantly. He didn't chase attention or try to stand out. He simply worked, and his paint jobs spoke for him. People in Vegas started recognizing his style before they even knew his name. His flames flowed like they were alive. His skulls had depth, and his fades were smoother than anything most painters could achieve. Ryan never cared about fame. In fact, he avoided it. He wasn't trying to get on TV, join a show, or become a personality. He just wanted a place where he could paint without distraction. That's why Danny the Count Coker noticed him. Danny didn't need someone loud, he needed someone who lived for the art. And Ryan was exactly that. When Counting Cars started, Ryan didn't audition or campaign for a role. He simply showed up to work like he always had. But the producers quickly realized he wasn't just another painter. He was part of the shop's identity. Fans started learning his name because of the work, not the words. Ryan became the calm in the chaos, the quiet balance that grounded the show. Yet this early life and artistic foundation also planted the seeds of his breaking point. Ryan wasn't built for shortcuts. He wasn't built for rushed deadlines. He wasn't built for turning art into a timed task. His perfectionism was his strength, but it also became the very thing the pressures of television would eventually crush. What shaped him as an artist would later collide with the demands of fame. And when those two worlds finally clashed, something inside Ryan began to crack. But that wasn't the whole story. The real trouble started when the show changed faster than he could. In the early days of Counting Cars, Ryan had the freedom every artist dreams of. He could take his time, study the metal, plan the layers, and create paint jobs that felt alive. The show moved at a slower rhythm, and Ryan's process fit perfectly into that world. His craftsmanship wasn't rushed, it was respected. But as the show grew, everything changed. The builds got bigger, the deadlines got tighter, the pressure from producers increased. What once took weeks now needed to be finished in days. Cameras rolled non-stop, and every project had to be TV-ready long before Ryan felt it was artistically complete. For most people, that pressure would be just another part of the job. For Ryan, it was something entirely different. His work wasn't mechanical, it was emotional. Every shade, every fade, every detail came from his obsession with getting things right, not fast. Rushing wasn't just difficult, it stripped the art of its meaning. Soon he found himself fighting two battles at once: the stopwatch held by television and the perfectionism that lived inside him. The more the pace increased, the more he felt the joy draining out of the craft he had spent his entire life building. Fans saw the finished pieces, but they never saw the toll the rushed process took on the man creating them. People close to the shop later admitted that Ryan struggled with the shift. He didn't complain, he didn't argue, he simply worked harder, trying to fit his perfection into the narrow sliver of time he was given. But perfection has a price, and Ryan was paying for it long before the audience noticed. The growing pressure didn't just challenge his workflow, it chipped away at something deeper, something personal, something he tried to hide even from those closest to him. And what happened next would reveal just how much the weight of fame and deadlines had already started to break him down. Before any announcement, before any explanation, and long before Ryan disappeared entirely, fans sensed something wasn't right. It started subtly. He showed up less on screen. His usual steady focus seemed heavier. The quick smiles he gave after finishing a masterpiece weren't appearing as often. Viewers who had watched him for years could feel the shift, even if they couldn't explain it. By 2021, the change became impossible to ignore. In some episodes, Ryan appeared only for a moment. In others, he was missing completely. Paint jobs that once centered around his artistry were suddenly shown in quick cuts, with no detailed process and no shots of Ryan guiding the design. The camera stopped lingering on his work, and that alone felt like a warning. Fans flooded comment sections and forums with questions. Where is Ryan? Why is he gone so much? Is something wrong? These weren't casual viewers, they were people who admired his craftsmanship and felt connected to his calm presence. The silence surrounding his absence only amplified their concern. Rumors started spreading. Some believed he had stepped away because of disagreements behind the scenes. Others speculated that the long filming schedule had drained him. A few even suggested there had been a personal struggle the show refused to acknowledge. The strange part was that Counting Cars never addressed any of it. No farewell message, no explanation, not a single word from the producers or the cast. That silence created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, suspicion grew. Why would a man who had shaped the identity of the show vanish without recognition? Why would the network avoid mentioning him altogether? And why did those closest to the shop hint that Ryan had been going through something deeply personal long before the cameras stopped rolling? The fans noticed the absence. But what they didn't know was that Ryan's battle had only begun. The pressure, the pace, the emotional exhaustion, and something far more personal were all gathering behind the scenes, waiting for the moment when everything would finally hit a breaking point. And that moment was closer than anyone realized. Ryan Evans was never the kind of man to show weakness. He didn't vent, he didn't complain, and he didn't let the world see when something was bothering him. But behind the calm expressions and perfect paintwork, a quiet storm had been building for years. And eventually, it grew too heavy to hide. As the deadlines tightened and the cameras sped up, Ryan found himself losing something he never thought he'd lose: his connection to the work. For him, painting wasn't just another task on a checklist. It was a piece of his identity. When the schedule forced him to rush, the joy faded. When the art stopped feeling meaningful, the pressure doubled. And when viewers only saw the finished result, no one realized what it cost him to get there. People who worked near him in Vegas later admitted that Ryan had been carrying emotional weight long before the audience sensed anything. He wasn't sleeping well. He looked drained between shoots. His focus was still sharp, but it came from habit, not from passion. Something inside him was wearing down. Then came the moment fans still whisper about a personal tragedy he never shared publicly. Some say he suffered a serious health scare that forced him to slow down. Others say he experienced a painful loss that shifted his priorities overnight. A few even mentioned that stress had begun affecting him more deeply than anyone realized. Nothing was confirmed, but those who knew him hinted that he was fighting a battle far bigger than the show, and because he didn't want sympathy or attention, Ryan kept all of it inside. Every day, he showed up with paint on his hands and focus in his eyes, even when the exhaustion was hitting harder than ever. But pain has a way of catching up, no matter how quietly a person tries to carry it. What viewers saw as a sudden disappearance wasn't sudden at all. It was the result of years of emotional strain, silent suffering, and a breaking point he reached long before the cameras stopped filming him. His mind, his spirit, and even his body were signaling the same thing: it was time to step back or lose himself completely. But Ryan's decision to leave wasn't a surrender. It was something far more courageous, and the reason behind it reveals everything he had been trying so hard to protect. When Ryan finally stepped back from counting cars, many assumed it was because of drama, money, or disagreements behind the scenes. But the truth was far more personal and far more painful. Ryan didn't leave because he wanted distance from the show. He left because staying meant losing the one thing he had spent his entire life protecting: the integrity of his craft. The pressure of television had transformed his art into a race. Paint jobs that once took time, patience, and emotional investment were now squeezed into strict shooting schedules. The producers needed content, the network wanted episodes, viewers wanted big reveals. But Ryan wanted something simpler: space to breathe, time to think, and the freedom to create without a clock ticking over his shoulder. Over time, that pressure turned into something deeper. People close to the shop whispered that Ryan had been dealing with mounting stress that affected both his focus and his health. Some mentioned a quiet medical scare he kept private. Others pointed to the exhaustion he could no longer hide. Whatever it was, those around him understood that he wasn't just tired, he was reaching a point where something had to give. Ryan had always believed that real art couldn't be rushed, but as the show demanded faster builds, he felt trapped between his love for the work and the pace of the production. If he stayed, he risked losing the very passion that defined him. If he walked away, he risked disappointing millions of fans who admired his craft. It was a choice no artist should ever have to make. In the end, he chose survival, not fame, not ratings, not the comfort of staying where he was already successful. He chose himself. He chose his peace. He chose to preserve the part of him the world fell in love with in the first place. His exit wasn't a dramatic moment. It wasn't a blow-up or a final argument. It was a quiet decision made after years of silent battles the cameras never saw, and battles he never talked about publicly. Ryan walked away because he knew if he stayed any longer, the work he loved would turn into something unrecognizable. Walking away saved his art, but it also revealed something deeper about why his silence mattered and why it changed the show forever. For years, Ryan Evans carried the pressure of TV deadlines, artistic perfection, and silent exhaustion. But in early 2025, everything he had been pushing through finally caught up with him, and it hit harder than anyone expected. Those close to him revealed that Ryan experienced a sudden medical emergency, the kind that forces a person to stop, breathe, and confront everything they've been ignoring for far too long. The details were kept private, but people familiar with the situation said it wasn't something small. It was a warning from his body, a moment that shook him, his family, and especially his wife, who had been watching him burn himself out piece by piece. For years, she saw what the cameras couldn't: the late nights, the stress he tried to hide, the fatigue he brushed off, and the weight of a schedule that never let him rest. When the emergency happened, she was the one who stayed by his side through every test, every appointment, and every moment of fear that he kept hidden from the public. She reportedly told friends that she had been begging him to slow down long before this, but Ryan, being who he is, always put the work first, believing he could push through anything. This time, he couldn't. Doctors advised him to step back immediately. Stress wasn't just affecting his mind, it was affecting his body in ways that could no longer be ignored. That medical scare became the turning point. It wasn't fame or drama that drove him away from the spotlight. It was survival, plain and simple. His wife stood firm, refusing to let him return to the exhausting pace that had pushed him to this moment. Those who knew them said she was his anchor, reminding him that life was bigger than deadlines and that his health mattered more than any build on television. The emergency forced Ryan to confront a truth he had avoided. If he kept moving at the pace the show demanded, he could lose everything, not just his joy for painting, but the life he was building with the one person who always saw the real him. For the first time in his career, Ryan listened to his body, his wife, and the people who cared about him. And that's when he made the decision that changed the show forever. He didn't walk away because he wanted to disappear. He walked away because staying meant risking the only things that truly mattered: his health, his family, and the quiet peace he had been missing for years. But stepping away wasn't the end of his story. In fact, it was the beginning of a completely new chapter, one the cameras never captured, and one that revealed the tragedy fans had always suspected lurked beneath his silence. After stepping away from the spotlight and surviving the medical emergency that nearly changed everything, Ryan Evans rebuilt his life piece by piece. For the first time in years, he was no longer racing against deadlines or carrying the weight of a show that demanded more than any artist could give. Life became quieter, but in that quiet, Ryan finally found clarity. In late 2025, Ryan opened up to a small group of close friends and fellow artists, revealing the truth he'd kept hidden behind years of silence. The tragedy fans had long suspected wasn't just about burnout. It wasn't just about stress. It was something deeper, something that shaped every decision he made after leaving the show. He admitted that the pressure he endured had pushed him to the edge physically, but what broke him emotionally was realizing how much he had lost along the way. His art, the one thing he built his life around, was no longer his escape. It had become a burden. And when he finally looked back at what the non-stop pace had taken from him, he realized something heartbreaking. He wasn't creating from passion anymore. He was creating from obligation. That realization hit him harder than any comment, deadline, or TV expectation ever could. It was the tragedy underneath everything, the fear that he had almost destroyed the very thing he loved most. But Ryan didn't face this alone. His wife stood beside him through every moment of recovery, reminding him that his worth wasn't tied to a show, a schedule, or even a single masterpiece. She saw a man who needed peace, not pressure. A man who needed space to breathe, not a camera in his face. With her support, Ryan began rebuilding his life on his own terms. Today, he paints only when he feels inspired. He takes on projects that speak to him, not ones dictated by production timelines. He mentors young artists quietly, passing down the skills that made him legendary. And though he rarely posts online, the glimpses he shares, soft ghost flames, deep metallic fades, quiet tributes, prove that his art is still alive, perhaps even stronger than before. Ryan has also made it clear that returning to television is not impossible, but it would only happen if the format protected his mental health, his pace, and his creative freedom. No rushing, no shortcuts, no pressure to perform, just pure craftsmanship. When he finally spoke about what happened, the message was simple yet devastating. He almost lost himself trying to give the world something beautiful, and he refused to let that happen again. For fans, this confession was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Heartbreaking because it confirmed what they always suspected: Ryan's disappearance wasn't a mystery for entertainment. It was a man fighting to save his passion before the pain consumed him. Inspiring because he chose peace over pressure, truth over silence, and art over fame. Ryan Evans didn't fade away. He stepped back to protect the thing that made him who he is. And in doing so, he rediscovered the part of himself the cameras could never capture.